Earlier this week, Bethesda released the Creation Club, and to say that it has mixed reviews would be quite the understatement. In fact, in just about every YouTube video, forum post, or any other discussion, it's mostly negative. And I'll be the first to say that these negative feelings towards what basically amounts to paid mods is seemingly justified for the most part. However, I think that the Creation Club stems from a much larger issue that the video game industry is facing, and that is the growing popularity of online multiplayer games and the impact they're having on big AAA studios, especially ones like Bethesda. And that's really what I want to discuss and throw out there, because there hasn't been much discussion, at least not that I've seen, regarding that topic. The internet is currently filled with hatred towards Bethesda because of what they're doing with the Creation Club, and YouTubers who I greatly admire like Gopher are up in arms about it, and again, rightfully so to some degree. But the argument I'm essentially presenting here is that I don't necessarily believe it is Bethesda Game Studios that has the sole responsibility for attempting to make gamers pay for mods. Yes, Pete Hines, we know you said it's not the same, but it is. The real issue is this. Large AAA game developers like Bethesda Game Studios are seemingly at a crossroads, or a rock and a hard place depending on your preference. It's no secret that games like Skyrim, Fallout 4, The Witcher 3, and Grand Theft Auto cost hundreds of millions of dollars to make, and years to make. They are on par with many motion pictures in terms of sheer scale, and with that comes the great need to make a profit, obviously. And many of the big successful developers do just that. However, here's where the problem is beginning, at least over the past decade or so. If you guys are like me, you very much so enjoy the big, open-world, single-player, role-playing experience that are provided by games like Fallout, The Elder Scrolls, and The Witcher. Even Grand Theft Auto can be included in these titles, as they provide kind of role-playing elements in a vast open world to explore and play in. But again, if you're like me, the things that you really love is an immersive and interesting story, creative and believable characters, and again, the single-player experience that allows you to feel as though you are part of the world. The key here is the single-player experience. That is the focus, or at least always has been, for Bethesda Game Studios. And as much as we like to nitpick at Fallout or The Elder Scrolls, they're fantastic. But the cost of making games like this compared to the risk of return is growing wider. Meanwhile, other developers have turned to multiplayer for a less risky and far more lucrative return on investment. The best example of this by far is Grand Theft Auto Online. Without going into much specific detail, let's just say that the online component of Grand Theft Auto 5, which really was originally more or less a side note, has become a monster, an absolute cash cow for Rockstar. The online mode alone has already generated over $500 million for the company, and this, again, was essentially a side mode for Grand Theft Auto 5. The mode has been so unbelievably successful that they're still pumping out content for Grand Theft Auto Online 4 years after release, and it doesn't look to be slowing down anytime soon. Consider the fact that Rockstar has always made its money in the past on the compelling single-player narrative, and this is a scary thought. More so, in case you're not already aware, there was a planned single-player DLC that was supposed to come out in 2014, I believe, that was reportedly about 60% finished. Voice acting had been recorded, motion captures, etc., and then it vanished. To my knowledge, Rockstar has not really ever commented on the seemingly forgotten single-player DLC. It just sort of disappeared, and not really many people even noticed. At least not enough to matter. Everyone's too engrossed in the online mode, which is generating hundreds of millions. And while I'm not a developer, I'm going to guess the manpower, effort, and money involved in creating something like Gun Running, or the new Smuggler's Run, or whatever it's called, is far less than creating a DLC like The Lost and the Damned or Gay Tony from Grand Theft Auto 4, which were fantastic. So essentially, why would Rockstar make these single-player DLCs? They cost more to make and bring in less money. On the flip side, online content costs less to make and brings in far more. The answer is pretty obvious for Rockstar, and really it's extremely scary for gamers like myself who enjoy nothing more than stories like the one we saw with Michael, Franklin, and Trevor in Grand Theft Auto 5. With Red Dead Redemption 2 right around the corner, I'd expect this trend to continue. There will likely be a good single-player campaign, as it had really already been developed prior to the success of Grand Theft Auto Online, but once released, I'd be shocked to see anything other than Red Dead Online content. I do not expect a single-player DLC for Red Dead Redemption 2 at all. And again, that to me is very, very scary. Now don't get me wrong, Grand Theft Auto Online is fun. I logged many hours into that mode and had a blast playing it, for a while at least. However, if I was provided with the option of playing an online mode or a story-driven single-player campaign, I'd go with the story without any hesitation whatsoever. But it seems that millions of people feel otherwise, and players that love immersive and compelling single-player stories really are now the minority. Now, you might think that this is just an isolated incident with Grand Theft Auto Online. People say, well, it's a unique game. But really, I disagree with you. It also happens in sports titles every single year. Take franchise mode, for example, which has long been the staple and selling point of sports titles up until maybe 5, 6, maybe as far as 10 years ago, I'm not sure. But those modes, like franchise modes, those are rotting away, getting little in the way of improvements or innovations year after year. Instead, the focus is on modes like Madden Ultimate Team in Madden or Diamond Dynasty and MLB The Show. In these modes, you build up your online teams and players spend hundreds of millions of dollars to do so. Again, easy to develop and huge returns. Why would EA or Sony spend the time and money developing modes that fewer and fewer people play that essentially bring in no extra money whatsoever? And there's many other examples of this happening throughout the industry. If you do any research, you'll quickly see that multiplayer games with microtransactions are growing exponentially, while single-player, story-driven games are diminishing in both number and arguably quality, if you ask me. Look at Mass Effect Andromeda, which got horrible reviews. And it was horrible in large part because of BioWare's focus, that being shifting from Mass Effect to their upcoming Anthem game, which will be an online game full of microtransactions. Destiny is the same way. So I say all that because that brings us back full circle to the developers like Bethesda Game Studios or CD Projekt Red. Bethesda and more recently CD Projekt Red have been really what I would consider the leaders in the AAA, the single-player, story-driven open-world games. Those are the games that I love to play the most, and to this day I still play Skyrim regularly. But you know, what are these developers to do? Really, it seems, in my opinion, there's only really one of two choices. Number one, they could join the growing contingent of developers that are gearing their games toward online multiplayer modes where they can make huge amounts of money from online purchases from consumers after the initial $60 purchase. I, for one, don't want AAA developers, especially like Bethesda or CD Projekt Red, to follow this path. However, I do believe they will be testing the waters for such a mode with their upcoming titles. It's relatively well known that CD Projekt Red's future title, Cyberpunk 2077, which still doesn't exactly have a release date just yet, that'll have some kind of multiplayer element to it. And while CD Projekt Red seems to be the darlings of the single-player developers at the moment after the success of The Witcher 3, it'll be interesting to see where their attention is turned if they start making, say, $500 million on their online mode alone. Something tells me that they, just about like every other developer, would follow the money. And Bethesda's next game, which is largely rumored to be an open world space game, Starfield is the rumored name, in case you're not already aware of that. That'll also likely have some kind of multiplayer component. And again, if it's successful, then who's to say they wouldn't follow the Grand Theft Auto Online model as well? And I say all that because essentially I believe it's nearly impossible for single player games to compete with the likes of Grand Theft Auto Online, Destiny, etc., because those online games have a much longer shelf life, and with it the potential to earn more money. And when I say impossible to compete with, I'm simply talking about from a financial perspective. So really, what's a company like Bethesda to do if they want to keep making single player games, which that's always seemed to be their focus? They talk about they like to make the games that they would want to play, which obviously have been single player games for years and years and years. And that really leads us to option number 2, and that is find other ways to make money out of their games. And I think Bethesda has essentially been the model for this, and that's what essentially has been angering quite a few people. I mean, just look at how many times they've sold Skyrim. Skyrim on the 360 and PS3. Skyrim Special Edition on Xbox One and PS4. Skyrim on the Nintendo Switch. Skyrim VR. They made a card game. And the merchandise. You can buy t-shirts and action figures. And if you want a life-size Dovahkiin bust, if you prefer. Fallout's the same way. Tons of merchandise, t-shirts or whatever. And now, God forbid, paid mods. Yes, again, Pete, we know you said that's not what it is, but again, yeah, it pretty much is. Now, it seems that every YouTuber is very quick to point the finger, they laugh, or just become incredibly angry at Bethesda's attempt to really milk every penny out of what is arguably one of the greatest role-playing games ever. I know I'll get some backlash from some people for even saying that, but in what is Skyrim. But I, for one, honestly don't have much, if any, problem with it. And if I'm being completely honest, I almost feel like I'm ripping off Bethesda when I buy a game from them for $60. I'm not going to throw out a number, but let's just say I'd pay a lot more than $60 for a game like Skyrim. It's an absolute bargain, especially when you compare that price tag to the likes of a game like, say, No Man's Sky. And really the bottom line is, I want Bethesda to keep making the Elder Scrolls and Fallout. And I want CD Projekt Red to keep making games like The Witcher and Cyberpunk 2077 forever. I want the Elder Scrolls 6 to be better than the Elder Scrolls 5. And I want these companies to constantly make innovations and improvement and continually improve their amazing single-player stories in their games. I don't want these types of experiences to go away, ever. I want to be 80 years old playing the Elder Scrolls X and be just as excited as I was when I played Oblivion for the first time. And I will be, as long as the games are made. But unless Bethesda Game Studios and similar developers find ways to compete with games like Grand Theft Auto Online, that future really will remain uncertain. So when Bethesda tries to make money on the Creation Club or selling another version of Skyrim, my reaction is almost always good. I hope they make a killing, because if they do, guess what? We'll get more of the games we love to play. So I guess the moral of the story here is that maybe we shouldn't be so quick to jump down Bethesda's throat from trying to capitalize on one of the most popular games of all time 5 or 6 years after it's released, or to try to charge people $5 for power armor in Fallout 4. Instead, I think we need to look at the bigger picture, and that is that AAA developers that make big open world story driven games, those single player games, have to find a way to make more than $60 per game. Period. I don't know what that number is exactly that they need to make. I'm sure one of their financial experts within their company could shed some light on that. But I do know that Bethesda Game Studios and CD Projekt Red definitely need to make more than $60 a pop for really their magnificent games. And that's fair enough for me. Maybe the answer is simply to charge more for the games in the first place. I really don't know. But just think back 10 years ago. It used to be the way for developers to make more after the initial $60 purchase was DLC. and it still is to some degree. But going back to Grand Theft Auto, the single player DLC is just financially not worth it. Remember Oblivion and the DLC expansion, Shivering Isles? In my opinion, that was one of the best DLCs I've ever played. Dawn Guard for Skyrim was another, and most recently Nuka World Fallout 4. All quality DLCs, and again, I want to see more of that. I always love buying a game like Oblivion or Skyrim, knowing that there will be more adventures and quests after I've essentially done everything in the game, because there will be some kind of DLC. However, with the new GTA model, maybe there won't be. And again, that's sad to me. I don't necessarily mean for this to be an outright defense of Bethesda Game Studios for everything they've ever done. I know they're not perfect, and but at the same time, let's not fool ourselves. A good number of us love story-driven games, but we're definitely now the minority. So for developers to continue to deliver to a minority audience, they're going to have to find some ways to generate more revenue than before. And I, for one, would be more than willing to do my part if it means ensuring the continuation of big, open-world, story-driven games. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, as I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm a new YouTube creator, and I'll be looking to do more videos, Let's Play, and possibly game reviews in the future. So please click on that subscribe button if you enjoyed the topic.